Hey everyone, it's Eric from Brook to River Fly Fishing. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to build this one-of-a-kind granite base for your vise that looks great and doesn't move at all while you're tying. You can see I can crank on this all I want with this granite base. It's not going anywhere. Now this should work for most any vise as long as it's attached like this one, which is there's a base with a bolt that goes up into this piece that holds the stem or the shaft of the vise. This is my Renzetti Traveler vise as I got it from the fly shop. There's nothing inherently wrong with this vise or the base as it comes from the shop, other than that it's just not very stable. Now, you can hold it with this other hand, yes, but sometimes you need to hold your materials on here with your other hand and it's just not feasible. Why not make a base that doesn't move when we try to tie? Here's a list of the tools that you'll need if you're going to make your own rock-solid base for your vise. If you're liking today's video about how to make this custom granite base for your vise, please subscribe to the channel and check out my other videos when you do. I'd start your project by finding the piece of granite countertop first. Just Google countertop companies in your area and then call them up and see if they have scraps to get rid of. The very first place that I called had a whole dumpster full of them that they usually have to pay to get rid of. At the very first countertop company that I went to, I got all of these stones plus 3 more that I've made into bases for other people. Most of the pieces that I got were granite, but they also had pieces of marble and quartz as well, which all had different patterns and made a really cool variety of bases. You can see that some are more uniform shaped like this, and others are more interestingly shaped like these. The first thing that I'm going to do in this process is to take this vise apart. First I'm going to loosen this set screw, take the stem out. Now I'm going to flip over the base so that I can see the bottom of it like this. On this Renzetti Traveler, the Allen wrench is a 5/32 Allen wrench down in there. So I'm going to take that off and loosen it, taking sure that I don't lose this bolt. Now I have this piece, which is going to be important for my new base. Once I have this piece off, the next thing that I'm going to want to do is to measure how far this bolt sticks out from the top surface of my old vise base. So I'm holding that bolt all the way in. I'm measuring it right here. That's 3/16 of an inch. It's a little bit less than 1/4 of an inch. I need to write that measurement down so that I have it for later. Now this bolt is going to be super important. I'm going to take this bolt with me to the hardware store where I can get a longer version of that same bolt so that I can use my thicker base and still get it tight when I put my stem back on. Now I'm going to take one of my new pieces of granite and I'm going to measure the thickness of this. So that's about 1 inch and 3/16. Again, just a little bit shy of that 1/4 inch line. To figure out how long this bolt needs to be, I take my measurement of how far this one stuck through the original base, and then I add the thickness of the granite to that. And when I put those two together, I get 1 inch and 3/8. The new bolt that you get at the hardware store needs to be at least the length of these things combined or longer. Mine's 1 inch and 3/8. Yours might be different depending on how far the original one stuck through the base or how thick the piece of granite that you're using is. I also want to get a nut that turns onto this bolt, not to actually use with the vise, but in order to make sure you have clean threads. I'll explain that more later. When I get to the hardware store, I'm trying to find a longer bolt of the same diameter, that's the thickness, as the original bolt. Now even if you have a bolt that's the same thickness, the same diameter, you want to take your new bolt that you find at the hardware store and you want to test it in that aluminum piece to make sure that it screws in there just like the old one did. And if it doesn't, have somebody help you find one that will. Now you can see the heads of these bolts are different. That's okay, it doesn't really make a big difference. We're going to put some rubber feet on the bottom of our new base that's going to account for that difference anyways. So just make sure that it's the same diameter, the thickness, and the threads are the same. Once you have this piece off and this bolt out, I would put them back together like this so you don't lose them. And now it's time to make a trip to your local hardware store. Now while you're at the hardware store getting your bolt and getting your nut, you're going to want to also pick up 4 of these little rubber feet. These are going to be important later. You're going to see why. Just make sure your feet are thicker than the head of the bolt and you'll be good. Now I can tell you without a doubt the hardest part of this whole project was getting the hole through the piece of granite so that the bolt could fit up through from the bottom. Now in order to drill through one of these pieces of granite, you need a special drill bit. This type of standard drill bit isn't going to cut it. You need to go to the hardware store and find something that says this on it: natural stone, granite, ceramic, and slate. This bit is made by Bosch. There's other companies that make them as well. And you can see this is a multi-pack right here. The size that I used to drill through this was 3/16, but that's going to vary depending on the thickness of that bolt that you had. If your bolt is thicker than mine, you're going to need a bigger bit. The multi-pack is more expensive. 3/16 worked for me, but it might not be the right size for you, so you got to check that out yourself. All right, we're back from the hardware store with our new bolt and our nut that we got. Remember, we're going to try to cut this to 1 3/8 inches. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our tape measure. We're going to measure off the inside surface of the head 1 3/8 inches, and then we're going to mark that with our marker. Now, it doesn't have to be perfect. You can see it's a little bit of a wide mark, but that's going to be just fine. This is where the nut becomes important. I need the nut to be turned up near the head of the bolt, and I'm going to clamp it near this end of the bolt. So I'm going to clamp it on the part that I'm cutting off. Now there's multiple ways to cut these bolts off. You could use a Dremel tool with a cutoff wheel if you have one. You can use a hacksaw if you have one. No matter how you cut it off, as long as you cut it off relatively cleanly, this nut's going to make sure that we have good threads on it when we're done. So I'm going to put my hacksaw on here. I'm going to get myself started with my cut line. I'm doing this left-handed because it helps the camera see a little bit better. Just going back and forth on my cut line. Being careful of my saw blade. Now when I'm done, you can see that I have a little bit of a burr on there. This is where the file comes in. I'm going to take my file. I'm going to smooth off those rough edges. Get the sharp parts down all the way around, just rotating it, smoothing it around like this. And now that I'm done, I'm going to unscrew my nut. And this nut is going to make sure that all those threads are clean when it comes off. So there's a little bit of a scrape right there, and now it came off. But that should ensure that when I go to put it back on, it starts cleanly, and it'll also start cleanly in the piece that is going into the vise. Now once you have your bit, you're ready to start drilling your hole through your piece of granite. You want to think about where you want your hole on the piece that you're using. You can see I chose to put my hole right here because I'm a right-handed tire and I wrap away from my body. So it made sense to have most of the weight on that side. You can put the hole wherever you want. It's probably going to be heavy enough wherever you want. I would put it towards one of the sides. I wouldn't put it right in the middle of your base unless you want it there for some reason. When trying to plan out where to drill your hole, it might be helpful to take this piece that you took off of the old one and move it around to where you think it looks good on your base. And then take the stem, put it down in there, and just see, does that look like where I want it? If not, you're better off moving it before you start drilling this hole, because once you start drilling this hole, you're not going to want to have to drill 2 of them. Once I have my bit, I need to put it in the drill that I'm going to use. You can see I have several different types of drills here. The standard cordless drill will work. You're going to want to make sure that you have your batteries charged the whole way, and you're going to have to be patient because this doesn't have the same kind of power as this or this. This is just a plug-in electric drill. It's got a cord on here as opposed to the battery. And this is my drill press. I did one of these with my cordless drill, I did one of these with my electric plug-in drill, and I did one of these with the drill press. These 2 options were by far easier than this one. But this will work if this is all you got. I've got my hole marked. I'm ready to start drilling. Now because I'm drilling the whole way through this, I'm going to want to have some space or something underneath between the granite and my countertop, or I'm going to drill into that. So I'm going to take this piece of wood, put it underneath just as a buffer area. Now when I get through there and I start seeing wood chips come up, I know I'm into this. You could use whatever you have laying around, and I'm ready to start drilling. I'm going to actually pop my bit out of this one and put it into my electric drill with the cord to drill this hole, and then we'll demonstrate that for you. One other thing that you're going to want to make sure you have before you start is a glass of water. That's because as you're drilling through this granite, it gets hot, and you're going to need to put that water onto the bit to cool it down so that you don't burn it up. If you turn this thing on and run it as fast as it will go, it won't get through this granite before you ruin and destroy the bit. So you kind of got to keep this thing going at about half speed or a slower speed than full out. Once I got it perpendicular and I got it straight, I'm ready to start drilling. Now, I don't want to have a hammer drill turned on. If you have a hammer drill that vibrates when you drill, you want to turn that off because these bits aren't made for that. I've got my hole started, and every once in a while I'm going to just put a little bit of water on there so that I can cool my bit down. You want to stop every once in a while and make sure you're still perpendicular, that you're vertical. I've got enough water on here, it's running down into the hole, but if you don't, you just pour a little bit more on there. You can see this is a long process. This isn't easy to get down through here. I'm just going to take my time and keep going. Alright, I'm getting there. I told you it wasn't easy. I'm about halfway. Ooh, look at that thing smoking. More water. If the water is getting everywhere, you can just sop up some of the extra. You just got to make sure you have enough down in the hole to cool the bit off. And there, I'm through. Now, just going to clean that hole out a little bit. Dry up the extra water. You can see that wasn't too bad. That took me a minute or two. You can see my piece of wood there got the little bit of hole that I drilled into it. That kept my countertop, which was underneath, safe, which is why we put it there to begin with. I've got my hole drilled through here, so now I'm going to pop my bolt through. Now, if for some reason you drilled your hole too big and this won't stay in, just put a washer over the end of it like this, put it back through the hole like that, and now it's going to keep it from coming through. And I'm going to screw my stem on. Stem holder. Now you can see, because I have the bolt head sticking out the bottom, it wants to wobble. Don't worry about that, we're going to fix that in a little bit. I'm going to put my stem down in there, cinch it up. There's my new base. Now you can see that the bolt head sticks out the bottom, but that's okay, because what I'm going to do now, so that it doesn't rock, is I'm going to take one of these little rubber feet. Make sure your base is good and dry first before you do this. Stick this on here. One in each corner. And now when I set it down, perfectly stable. It doesn't rock, it doesn't move. That's a nice heavy-duty base. My stem is attached there very nicely. Now, one thing to really be careful about is you want to make sure you drill your hole perpendicular. In other words, if you get off at an angle, you might see a little gap down here at the bottom around the place that holds the stem. That's very important when you drill your hole, to make sure it goes perpendicular. Now, I kept this old base and I just kind of have it sitting around in case I ever decide I want to use it again. But my guess is when you make your new base, this base isn't going to be super helpful to you anymore. Thank you for watching this brook to river fly fishing tutorial on how to make your very own custom granite based vise. I hope it was helpful. I hope you learned some things. And now that you've got a really awesome base for your vise, go catch some fish. That's all for now. Bye.